Hey everybody. In this podcast today, I'm going to talk about what I think is the most brilliant campaign of the entire Civil War. And probably there's no surprise, it was led by U.S. Grant. And it happened between the late fall of 1862 and July 4th, 1863. It culminated on Independence Day, 1863. Um, just a reminder that what I'm going to talk about is the Vicksburg campaign. And the Vicksburg campaign, what it does is it opens up the Mississippi River to the north, or to put it in another way, the Union recaptures regains control of the entire Mississippi River, which was hugely significant. Vicksburg doesn't get the publicity, I think, of Gettysburg or Antietam or some of the other battles in the East. But it was a major victory for the Union for a number of reasons, one of which it separated the Confederacy. It divided it in two, Texas being in the western half of the Confederacy, of course, after July 4th, 1863. And um, it also opened up this major transportation artery to northern farmers in Illinois and Indiana. Again, think of the Mississippi River as an I-10 or an I-45. It's a major transportation artery. And long story short, the Union can't defeat the Confederacy until it captures the position at Vicksburg. Um, I'm going to do a better job than I've done in the past of sending you the URLs of maps that I have in front of me. But if you can take a look at this, and I really, really advise you to take a second to look at these maps, because it'll help so much in understanding the nature of this campaign. What we're dealing with, Vicksburg was a very high position on the eastern side of the Mississippi River, in the state of Mississippi, right on the state of Mississippi, and right across from neighboring Louisiana. So that's where Vicksburg was located. It was a Confederate position at a very high point, right on the border between Louisiana and Mississippi, on the Mississippi side of the Mississippi River. And it was a very tough nut to crack. It's going to take Grant over 7 months to capture the Vicksburg position for reasons that I'll explain today. And I think it shows a lot about Grant, his strategic thinking. He thinks out of the box here. Look at the size of the space that he's dealing with. He starts the campaign in Memphis, so he's dealing with a huge area of space. The other thing that's notable about this campaign is Grant uses what today we would call combined operations. He uses the Army, the Navy, and the cavalry branch of the U.S. Army. So he uses every branch of the military service that is available to him in capturing Vicksburg. And it's just a huge moment in the history of the Civil War. But again, although it culminates at the same time of the Battle of Gettysburg, that was by accident. Grant had started his campaign to capture Vicksburg really in December of 1863, and he'd been thinking about it even before that. And what happened at Gettysburg was the culmination of the defeat of the Union Army at Chancellorsville, which opens the door for Lee to invade Pennsylvania, where he's defeated at the Battle of Gettysburg. So they happen simultaneously, and on the face of it, it looks like the Union Army has created this, there was this one mind that had fought to to try to defeat Lee at Gettysburg and to try to capture the Vicksburg position. As I've said many times, this is not the case. There's not an overall guiding hand in terms of creating a strategy for the Union Army until the spring of 1864. Actually, over a year after, well, a little less than a year after Gettysburg and Vicksburg. So, although they happen simultaneously, they're very, very different campaigns that did not have one guiding mind behind them. Now, before I get to Vicksburg, I want to go back to the east for a second And I'm not going to talk about what's going on in the Eastern Theater until till Grant moves to the east in the late winter and early spring of 1864. There's not a lot going on in the Eastern Theater, specifically in Virginia. So, as you know, as I talked about on Monday, the Union forces defeat Confederate forces at Gettysburg. Huge victory, very, very significant. But for Lincoln, this was not enough. Lincoln was very, very upset that Meade, after he defeated Lee at Gettysburg, that Meade didn't follow up and destroy Lee's army. And this is one of the really key points I want you to take from this course, that by 1863, if not before, Lincoln has come to the insight that in order to defeat the Confederacy, you have to defeat the armies of the Confederacy. It's not enough, especially in the East, to take land. For instance, when Lee refuses Hooker's suggestion that Hooker go in and capture Richmond after Lee goes up into Pennsylvania. It's not enough to capture land, especially in the Eastern Theater. You've got to destroy the Confederate army, especially Lee's army. In Lee's army, I don't think it's too much to say, was the heart and soul of the entire Confederacy, although there are battles happening all over the Confederacy during this period. But Lee's army is really the heart and soul of it. And so Lincoln wants Lee's army destroyed. He wants it ground down. And what does that mean? That means Lee's soldiers getting killed, or somehow getting knocked out of action. So what Lincoln wants is he wants Meade to go after Lee. Lincoln's not satisfied with Gettysburg. He wants Meade to go after Lee as Lee retreats back into Virginia, and to attack him and to try to absolutely annihilate Lee's army while it's retreating after it's defeated Gettysburg. Well, Meade doesn't do this. Meade basically, I don't think it's too much to say that Meade was just happy that he'd won at Gettysburg. Remember, he'd been in command for like less than a week of the Union Army when the battle happened. And it was a pretty close call at Gettysburg, right? Especially on the second day at the Little Round Tops. So Meade doesn't move as quickly as Lincoln would like. And Lee manages to get back into Virginia without too much of a hassle. And like I say, I'm not going to talk too much about the Eastern Theater until the action that happens in May of 1864. But I want to talk about one incident that happens in the period, in the immediate post-Gettysburg period. And that is Lincoln's reaction to Meade's tardiness, or his slowness. Lincoln is very upset with Meade. He's happy that Meade had gained a victory at Gettysburg, of course, but he wanted more. He wanted Lee's army destroyed, and he thought Meade blew a chance to do that. It's unclear if actually Meade was in any position to destroy Lee's army. Lee was quite good when he was being attacked, but that's another story. So what Lincoln does is he writes a letter, a memo to Meade, where he just says, look, thank you for your victory at Gettysburg. You did great service, but this could have been so much more. If you had aggressively moved against Lee's army as it retreated back to Virginia, you could have destroyed Lee's army, possibly anyway, or at least an element of it. You could have done so much more damage to the Confederate cause than you did by your victory at Gettysburg. But you didn't. You just kind of sat on your ass, and you were just kind of happy with the victory at Gettysburg. Of course, Lincoln didn't use that language, but that was what was definitely implied. So Lincoln writes this memo, but in characteristic fashion, Lincoln does not send it to Meade, because he knew if he sent the memo to Meade that Meade would get all pissed off and he would resign. He'd quit. Meade was very thin-skinned. And it was a very sharp rebuke to Meade, especially given that Meade had just won this big victory at Gettysburg. So what does Lincoln do? He puts the memo in his desk and he never sends it. Basically what Lincoln does is he vents. He vents in a memo, and which he puts away and never shows Meade, and it's only discovered after the Civil War. So basically, the story here is Lincoln was his own best therapist. He was his own best psychiatrist. He wrote this memo. He vented in this memo. He vented his frustration. But he was too wise to send the memo to Meade because he knew that Meade would resign, that he'd be upset. And Lincoln couldn't have that because, hey, Meade had just won this big victory. So that's the culmination now of Gettysburg, and then we're going to move away from the Eastern Theater in July of '63, and we won't catch up to the Eastern Theater until March, April, May of '64. Because at that point, Grant's on the scene in the Eastern Theater, and then things start to definitely happen.